Step 1 is be ready to ignore judgment, because the general population sees people who do these apps as modern day janitors, which is a necessary but highly shunned occupation to have. But it gets worse because many people will go as far to say this lowly position isn't even a real job at all. And if you do them exclusively, your peers will likely see you as unemployed. It's seen this way because it's a relatively new concept and people hate new things. Also, because there's a low barrier to entry, and if anybody can do it, it must lack intrinsic value, even if the money isn't bad. You don't respect yourself, you'll stay broke, you're unintelligent, and you're a failure. These people will be adamant there is no money to be made because, well, that's what they want to think themselves. I personally made about $45,000 from these apps, which isn't like insane money, but it's exactly what I needed to get my finances sorted. But by talking you out of it, they convinced themselves that potentially bettering their own financial position with an opportunity that's never been available until modern day isn't worth getting out of bed before dawn or getting home after midnight. Many of them also struggle with self-motivation, that being that there's no consequence to not accepting a delivery. You won't be scolded by a manager, you won't be fired by a boss, you can just not do it and nothing happens. And of course, these same people may want to just avoid the judgment that they tend to put on others. And they have genuine, authentic proof of this. That being the anecdotes of people, possibly themselves, who have been onboarded onto one of these apps, they accepted a few $2 DoorDash orders, and they made $12 after 2 hours. They uninstall the app and go home because who wants to work for $6 an hour while tearing up your vehicle? They're right that gig apps are not a job. To me, they're a more gamified real-world puzzle. You'll need to experiment, explore, and figure out the best strats for your environment. Which brings us to step 2. You do need a vehicle. Unfortunately, there's very few ways to work around this. But before the vehicle-less viewers throw in the towel, I will include a few recommendations for doing gigs without one. You might be surprised who will let you borrow their car. I've borrowed cars from friends while mine is in the shop, and vice versa. Friends have borrowed my cars for gig apps. This of course requires a lot of trust and at least some basic connections, but my point is that it may not be completely futile. Though it does help solidify that you usually have to spend money to make money. Even renting a car may be worth it for gig apps as long as you don't fall asleep through Hire a Car or Turo or even directly through Uber. If you pick the right car. If you can at least have someone give you rides, I'll give a few specific game plans in a few minutes on which apps might be best for you, even let's say you don't even have a driver's license. But before you secure a car, let's move on to step 3, which is getting onboarded. It doesn't matter if you can't decide which app to download, because you should get all of them. All apps are age restricted, but to different ages. Some are 18 plus, some are 21, some are 25. Some are only available in certain regions, and some have very lengthy wait lists. So the solution is to simply sign up to every reputable app, and I'll link a bunch in the description of this video. What's really gonna help anyone doing gig apps is when it's not out of desperation, but instead helping provide you a cushion. You might tell yourself, okay, I'll pick up a side hustle if I lose my job or if I run out of savings. I essentially waited until this moment, so it meant I couldn't be as picky with which deliveries and which blocks I accept, since it was either accept something or don't pay the monthly dues on my loans this month. You could argue that if I could go back, I should have started side hustling as my money was slipping, not waiting until it was kind of gone and then I had to do them. This would have meant I could have skipped deliveries, let's say on rainy days or snowy days. I could turn off my alarm if it goes off at 2 a.m. and I'm just feeling so tired, or maybe I'm feeling a bit sick, instead of just having to push through it. And sometimes days are just unpredictably slow. So even if you do go out, you might come home empty-handed sometimes. One great use case for these apps are if you do have a savings and you want to make a purchase without dipping into it. Even as simple as like, you want to upgrade your phone, you want a new iPhone, so instead of financing one for $850, you could just use your old phone to bang out 10 Amazon shifts, or do a couple weekends of Uber and buy the phone in cash. You can't get fired from gig apps, there's no exclusivity, and none of them require minimum hours. Many of you decided to download an app while watching my videos over the past couple years, just for the heck of it. You make an account, whatever, you get onboarded, you don't even do it. But a few of these viewers ended up following up with me over like DMs and email because they recently and unexpectedly lost their job. The messages are basically that they're so glad they had the app ready to go because they could immediately start earning some cash. Literally just a few days ago, one guy DM'd me and said it was the difference in making his rent payment on time this month because he was living paycheck to paycheck and had lost his job just a few weeks prior. Some apps like Uber might take a while to get you online because you may need to complete some of these things. Other apps have extremely long wait lists like Amazon Flex or Walmart Spark. Did I say Walmart? Walmart Spark. Just make sure you're signing up to legit platforms because they are going to ask for a ton of your personal information that could be used to steal your identities. Don't download just anything that remotely looks like a gig app. You should make sure it's a legit app first. Speaking of background checks, step 4 is probably don't be a felon and don't shoot the messenger but this might affect onboarding. Step 5. When people are discouraging you from seeing gig apps as an opportunity because they want to convince themselves that it's the equivalent to slavery, their most common reason will probably start like this. It's gonna cost more to repair your car after all this driving than you even earn from DoorDash. This is generally a cope, and they're usually wrong, but they might be right sometimes, honestly. So the solution to this is just 2 minutes of Googling your vehicle's gas per mile, maintenance per mile, and depreciation per mile. So in my case, my 2019 Tesla Model 3 costs 4 cents in fuel, 8 cents in maintenance, and 27 cents in depreciation. The good news is the mileage tax deduction write-off goes up every year. In 2025, it's 70 cents per mile, so this is nearly double the 39 cents it actually costs me, which more than takes care of my vehicle's costs. However, an example of a vehicle that may not be worth it is a 2025 Mercedes GLE, which would be 80 cents per mile in gas, 5 in maintenance, and 44 in depreciation for a total of $1.30 per mile. So it might be better to sell this car and get something different, but don't let me tell you what to do. People tell me to sell my cars and I don't. So also, I would love to be Ubered in a luxury SUV. The final thing we should cover before getting on the road is step 6, safety. There's a lot that can go wrong during deliveries, especially from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. when I was on the road the most. My concern was usually my personal safety, say being bit by a customer's dog or being robbed or carjacked. As long as you're staying aware and not careless, I don't think these risks should dissuade most people from side hustles, depending on your location. The most common would definitely be a car crash, simply because we're on the road for hours longer than the average person. And in the case you are seriously hurt, your injury could potentially be worth millions without time-consuming appointments, paperwork, upfront costs, and just reliving the traumatic event over and over. Insurance companies often lowball clients' claims, but if you become Morgan & Morgan's client, they will fight to get you the money you deserve for getting hurt. They've achieved significant verdicts in the past couple months for victims involved in a huge plethora of injuries, including life-altering car crashes, like $12 million in Florida, which is 34 times the highest insurance offer, $26 million in Philadelphia, 40 times the highest insurance offer. One client was hit by an uninsured motorist and sued his own insurance after they offered just $50,000, which didn't even cover medical expenses. So Morgan & Morgan secured him over $5 million. Morgan & Morgan's fee is absolutely free unless you win your case. You're just a few clicks away from potentially changing your life. You can start your own claim now with Morgan & Morgan at forthepeople.com/goherping, linked in the description, or by using your phone to scan the QR code on screen. Thank you to Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring. Back to the video. So to continue on with safety, you may want to consider not just self-defense, but self-defense classes. Now, this may sound over the top and a little bit less attainable, but it's because I try to talk about safety, assuming someone like my sister is watching, who I don't want to get a call that she's been mangled by a pit bull or assaulted by a customer. I saw 2 videos of delivery drivers being shot at, or literally shot, in the past 12 hours on Reddit. And while it's unusual that I saw 2 in one day, I admittedly have to accept that there is risk associated with entering residential properties at night. Well, not entering the property, but walking on the property. But I would argue that every opportunity comes with a certain amount of risk. How you prepare yourself varies person to person and region to region, depending on your laws and your comfort level. But again, you probably should not take safety advice from me because I'm just a YouTuber, okay? And you're welcome to give your own ideas in the comments. Okay, let's get into more specifics with step 7. Here's the apps I've done and how much I've made from each one. Some are at 0 because I was on the wait list and then I finally got off the wait list, but by then I was already either locked in on the apps that I like or I was done with gig apps already. But even between the ones I have done, you can see there's a big discrepancy between how much I made on each one. And it's not because one app is inherently better than the other. I would argue it's too individualized to say which one is best, and it's actually based on your location, your vehicle, your skill sets, your interests, what days and what times you want to work, and for how long at a time, and even your age and sex can play a role in this. So for step 8, I suggest you start with the app that seems the most fun, and then try a few others. This is where most people give up. They pick an app that they think will make the most money, or they pick the one that looks the easiest, and then they try it for a couple days, maybe a week, maybe even a month, and then they give up. Here's a real world example. You download Amazon Flex. You see a block and you take it. $54 for 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. at warehouse DRT8. You show up and have 49 stops in downtown Durham. You get stuck in rush hour traffic. 5 of your stops required signature from closed businesses, and 10 were in sketchy neighborhoods. You finish 2 hours late and have to return undeliverables to the station and ended up an hour away from home. And also it was raining the whole time and you fell in a puddle of water. This is 100% possible because it's happened to me, but also only some of these issues are from being dealt a bad hand. Others are in your control that you can work off of. I suggest that you stick with an app for a while so you can really experiment. With Amazon, figure out the best times to grab a block and your personal minimum price. Then figure out the best duration blocks and which warehouses to get them from. Stick to the warehouses that show patterns of delivery into places convenient to you. So in my case, it would be VNC3 instead of DRT8. Stick to blocks with the least traffic in your area. So for me, that would be 3 a.m. to 7 a.m., but also 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Or if you can only deliver during the day, maybe focus on weekend blocks to avoid work traffic and school buses. Learn when Amazon posts the blocks with the highest rate increases. So for me, this is usually around midnight to 2 a.m., but I've heard other drivers in my area have found their own little personal algorithms and schedules that they follow. With DoorDash, it's as simple as experimenting with different shopping malls and different locations at different times of day, different times of the week. Or say with Uber, maybe you drive sketchy people to sketchy places in the middle of the night and potentially assist in activities that you'd rather not be involved in at all, and then they don't even tip you. Okay, that's a bit extreme, and you kind of have to go out of your way to end up in these scenarios, which I may or may not have done, but by sticking to areas you know well and during times of day that you're comfortable, that already eliminates a lot of risk. Everyone has different preferences on when and where to Uber. For example, many people think it's crazy that my permanent schedule became 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. on weekends exclusively in a college town. I was doing 5 to 15 minute trips of as many as 5 drunk students at a time, over and over and over, until everyone was back from the bar to their dorms or apartments or frat houses. But shout out to them for not driving. That's good. I'm glad that they were taking Uber. The other great thing about Uber is how much control you have over the experience for the customer, which I want to go into, but I have so much to say that I'm going to make a separate video about this. So basically, I'm not an expert on any gig app, but I do feel the most fluent in Amazon Flex. And that's because I spent time exploring each app, usually first just by logging in and doing it. And then after fumbling through, I start to do a little research and say ask other dashers for DoorDash. Like literally while waiting at restaurants for orders, I would berate other people who look to be waiting for orders with questions on what to do, how much they make, what not to do, and just any tips they have. Same for Uber. Before I became a driver, when I would order an Uber for myself, I'd ask the drivers like, oh, is it worth it? Should I do it? And they all said yes. They all said I should do it. So I was like, all right, I'll do it. And then once I was a driver, when I was ordering Ubers for myself, I would spend the entire ride doing Q&A sessions with the drivers on how much they make and what brings them the most success. They're surprisingly open too. Most people are willing to tell you like everything. I also spent hours online, just like on Discord, doing voice calls with full-time DoorDashers and Uber drivers. Again, just berating them with questions and seeking advice from the pros, the people that literally pay all their bills every month with these apps, because they have a lot to share. Gig apps are simple, but they don't hold your hand. They actually do work against you because the goal is to get drivers to accept as little money for as much work as possible. This is why I think you should prioritize the app that you simply find the most fun, because if you're like me, you'll be more motivated to dig deep and try as many different techniques for extended periods of time to see what gives you the best results. Uber objectively paid me better than Amazon Flex at its peak. I was nailing $30+ an hour, while Amazon was $5 to $10 less than that. But because I didn't enjoy Uber as much, it was harder to stay consistent, even if I was just doing it for a couple nights each weekend. But with Amazon, I could hit the warehouse every day with no weekends for months at a time. And then there's DoorDash and Instacart. I would experiment with both, particularly because I knew there were ways to set yourself above the rest. DoorDash is the most popular hustle for gig appers to do full-time in my area. Finding someone who dashes is like shooting fish in a barrel, because it feels like everyone's at least tried it at some point, but only some are making enough to truly financially excel. And when you do ask them how they do it, they've each crafted their own individual recipe for success, although there is overlap between them. And this is from when to do it and where, how much, how often, their acceptance rate, how they communicate with customers. They've turned it into a repeatable formula that they can essentially zone out and just follow their programming after a while. Same with Instacart. A lot of people do it, but I would guess it's like the top 5% who are making really good money doing it. As a customer, I've ordered like maybe 15 Instacart orders, and there is a very clear discrepancy between the good drivers and the bad drivers, and it clearly reflects on how much I tip them and how much I come back to Instacart. It leaves the bottom 95% just picking up the scraps of the app. So I think you need to try and hit the top 5% the way I feel like I did with Amazon Flex. And it's not just about money, and it's not just about time. With Flex, okay, yes, I was finishing early, I was finishing efficiently, and it's not just about the time and money it costs you. With Flex, yes, okay, I was finishing early, I was efficient, and I was getting great blocks in my opinion. But what really helped me succeed with it is how I could go into this like low power mode. Not like low power on my phone or on my car, but myself. I burned very little physical and mental energy doing Amazon Flex because I figured out my own formula from grabbing blocks, and by the way, no, I never used a bot grabber to grab blocks, it was all done manually, to organizing packages in my car, to spamming out deliveries twice as quickly as other drivers. Compare this to my Uber experience, where I did figure out the formula of when to do it and where, who to drive, what to say to them and what to do, and I was getting tips that I was extremely happy with. But man, it drained me so badly. With Uber, I'd get home and I would just collapse. But banging out an Amazon shift, to me, felt the same as like hitting the gym in the morning. Like, okay, yes, you exert energy, but after a quick shower, it leaves you feeling refreshed, you feel accomplished, and you can still complete your full workday afterwards. This was my Amazon Flex experience. I get up, I exert energy, but then I get home, I shower, I feel good, I made some money, and then I truly start my day. Delivering for Amazon was part of my morning routine. But this varies person to person on what's best and for who. So this is why I have trouble watching those gig app tutorial videos online, because in my opinion, they're just not individualized enough, especially not per region. Which brings us to step 9. Aggressively track everything. What I'm about to say will sound over the top, but when I started Uber, I would write down how much I earned from every single trip, how many miles it was, how much they tipped, and leave notes for myself. Did I talk to them? Yes or no? Did I offer them a snack? Yes or no? Did they make additional requests, like adding a stop? Did I accept this request? I wouldn't write everything down, and over time I wrote down less and less until eventually I was just like I was in a routine. But still, I would always take mental notes of things like demographics to figure out who I should target for future trips, who's the nicest to me, who shows up the quickest to the car, who gives me the best tips. For example, I had infinitely more success and a lot more fun Ubering Gen Z and younger millennials than I did with Gen X and boomers, even though I assumed I would prefer older people because, well, they're more mature, they're probably going to be friendlier, and they probably have more money, so they would theoretically tip better. But I was completely wrong. It turns out most of the respect and most of the money comes from people my age and younger. I had spreadsheets for Amazon Flex and a notebook for DoorDash. I really think you need to document yourself, even if it's not for YouTube or anything, because it's going to be harder to iterate and give yourself feedback if you aren't keeping track. And I think this goes for anything. If you're lifting weights, you got to keep track of how much you're lifting and how often. Or if you're trying to build a YouTube channel, that's why analytics exist. Or if you're stock trading, that's why everyone has a trading journal. Well, at least you should. You'll also want to keep track of how many miles you drive, which can be done with specialized apps for gig appers. But personally, I just used my odometer in a notebook. But also, what a lot of people don't do is keep track of the miles you're driving not for gig apps. I suggest you track every mile and keep track of which ones are for gigs and which ones are not. Because then when you do a car repair, let's say even just an oil change or like replace part of your suspension, you can then create a quick formula, do some quick math, some division, to see what percentage of that cost was because of gig miles versus personal miles. So you do a $50 oil change, 50% of your miles were for gig apps. Okay, $25 expense came from the gigs themselves. However, you cannot write these off on your taxes if you're doing the standard mileage deduction. This would simply be for your own numbers so that you understand how much money you're making after expenses. You'll understand your true real-world earnings from gigs instead of an estimation. Because personally, nothing stresses me out more than when there's question marks in my finances. So I can't stress enough how much it helps to track every penny. Speaking of cars, let's move on to step 10, some more options if you don't have a car at all, or maybe no driver's license. If you can at least get someone to give you rides, you may be able to Instacart shop-only orders, which does not require delivery. These just are not super common in my area. However, certain regions are likely to have more of this available. You just can stay in the grocery store and you only pack orders. I also downloaded Hire, but I never took a shift. However, it offered on-demand 8-hour grocery shifts where I would literally have been like working a deli or stocking shelves. The pay was bad, but it's money. Money is money sometimes. You may be able to make Rover work, which would be for pet care, or if you have a really good friend who really likes your company and enjoys driving, you could even do Amazon Flex or a food delivery app. In the end, it's probably better to just not look for gig apps if you can't drive, but I do want to give everyone some ideas. But I personally would love to be able to just drive all day without getting out of the car and without random passengers. One of my favorite gig app dynamics was when my friend who hated driving would take a block on her own account and I would just sit in the car. She goes into the warehouse, she gets the packages, she organizes them, and she runs door to door taking the pictures. I just vibe to music and follow GPS and drive around town. The only thing I have to do is supply my car and give up some of my time, which some people would be willing to accept less money for. So say you could find someone who wants to drive, just pay them maybe 30% or 50% of your earnings to cover the vehicle expenses and compensate them for their time. But you could maybe even get away with giving them a little bit less if you remind them that they can take advantage of the standard mileage deduction because they're doing these miles for business purposes and they can save money on their taxes. Unfortunately, it would not save you money, but also you don't have a car, so you have fewer options. Also, you should probably check with an accountant on tax things. I'm doing my best though. Which brings us to step 11. Keep trying new ideas and trying various combinations. Is multi-apping worth it in your market with certain side hustles? Should you run Uber and Lyft at the same time? Or should you just focus on one? Should you do Grubhub and Uber Eats? Some people even DoorDash while on an Amazon shift, which to me is insane. I don't know how that's possibly worth it, but I mean, I won't fault them if it works. Or maybe just decide when to do what. So do Uber and Instacart on the weekends and do Spark and Grubhub on the weekdays. I don't know. Personally, I have tried multi-apping many times, but it just wasn't worth the extra like logistical disaster. To me, the best value I was able to obtain leads us into step 12. Multitask while you work, but safely. So don't like text and drive while you do it, but now's the time to listen to the audiobook you've wanted to learn from. Now's the time to introspect over your feelings. Now's the time to sit with your thoughts or listen to all your favorite albums at full blast, or make calls to your friends or use speech to text to write a video script. Yeah, these are all things that I actually would do while delivering. So spending this much time on the road will hopefully truly help you achieve the financial goals you're after. But that's not to say it can't also be utilized to improve other parts of your life. But wait, because we still have a few more things to cover with step 13, create realistic, achievable goals. Why are you making this money? You literally need to write these things down, whether it's on paper or on your phone. How much do you want to make? How soon? And what is it for? 2 specific examples that I have for myself were pay my personal loan off 1 year early, $3,600. I finished this with 2 months to spare, and pay the rest of my car loan off by Halloween 2024, $5,200. And I finished that with 1 month to spare. And for me personally, I find the greatest fuel is giving myself the immediate gratification for going out and getting the work done. So if I Ubered, so let's say for 4 hours, before I even drive home, I would do an instant deposit into my bank account and immediately submit the payment towards my credit card. I got to see the money come in and immediately see it get posted towards my goal. However, there were those months where I was just super short on money and literally needed to pay my basic bills. While this was more important than paying my loans off early, I was honestly a little bit less motivated when the goal is pay mortgage, because this just repeats every 30 days, which feels like never ending basically. Which brings us to step 14. In my opinion, you need an exit plan. I really like gig apps, as made clear by how much I've been sucking them off this entire video, but I would hate to do gig apps in perpetuity. From the very first day I downloaded the very first app that I tried at age 22, I gave myself an end date. I cannot rely on gig apps by my 25th birthday. This helped me with a few things. The first is ensuring I stay focused on building up other sources of income instead of slipping into a sustainable but flat routine. Many people just deliver a few days a week or even every day and all their bills are paid. And that's it. Gig apps, pay bills. Gig apps, pay bills. Gig apps, pay bills. This flat circle would make me lose my mind. Even if it requires less work than what I was doing, I much prefer pushing harder and faster to achieve a specific outcome sooner. I think many people will benefit from picking up gig apps and not giving up until you've truly tried to figure out how to make one work. But you equally need to formulate a plan. Even if you start the apps without a plan, please use this driving time to figure out a plan. Even if you don't stick with it, at least get a concept of a plan. At the start of this video, I mentioned most people who trash these apps are those who try it for a day or two and then give up. But there's actually a second group of people who hate them even more, and that is the gig appers, who have been doing this full time for 3, 5, or even 10 plus years now. It's the jaded drivers who have tens of thousands of deliveries. And that's not to say everyone with 5-digit stats hates their gig job, because I've also met some, usually it's Uber drivers, who are simply so good at it and they're in such a groove that this is as good, if not better, than any other career that they'd want to be doing. It's just those people who are built for it and are genuinely killing it. But I believe the far majority of people are more like me, and they're gonna lose their mind if they go into these apps with no greater prospects, basically. You'll eventually hit a ceiling where you probably can't get much better. You can't make more per hour, and you've reached the top of the leaderboard. You've maxed your stats and you just coast. The good news is it becomes easy. It's no longer a difficult position, and maybe this is exactly what you need. But if you're like me, this is more so going to give you a sense of uneasiness. I think I hit that ceiling with Amazon Flex last year. I was making $3K a month profit, delivering 30 hours a week, which was covering all my bills, but my stomach began to hurt when I was feeling too comfortable. I hate the feeling of stagnation, and maybe some people seek this feeling, which is like more power to them. But even then, gig apps historically become harder over time as more people join, and the companies themselves want to increase their margins as investors apply pressure for them to achieve better profitability. Also, we never know how long an opportunity will last, be it a traditional career, a YouTube channel, a gig app, just anything you can do. I'm a firm believer on refusing opportunities, because you're never going to be able to fully indulge in the opportunities that are best for you or the ones that you care about if you just keep on doing more things. But maybe this window of gig app opportunity is the right one for you. In which case, I say just go for it and see what they can do for you. Just be safe, and as a final bonus step, step 15, don't take it too seriously. Don't let bad customers mentally follow you home. If your earnings were horrible one day or you got back super late, Try not to spend even more time at home frustrated about the time that you wasted, or you're just going to waste more time. Acknowledge it and figure out what to do different, but move on and try again next time. It sounds cheesy, but I think it's true. Ultimately, it's all a game. It doesn't matter. You can start anytime, you can stop anytime. It's all up to you. So I say just have fun with it.